The White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce and On Location TV19 are proud to present Your Business Matters, dedicated to your business needs. The White Bear Area Chamber is a nonprofit business organization serving as an advocate for the White Bear area and its business community. Now here is the Executive Director of the White Bear Area Chamber and the host of Your Business Matters, Tom Snell.
Welcome to the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce program, Your Business Matters. And today we have as our guest Mr. Perry Jones. He's from the US Geological Survey, and we're going to talk about some of the issues related to White Bear Lake and to the use of water that we have in our community. And Perry, thank you very much for coming to be part of this interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. The first thing I want to ask you, Perry, is really what is the US Geological Survey and what do they do?
Well, the US Geological Survey is a federal government agency that deals with a lot of environmental issues in dealing with geology, water, and biology, as well as looking at mapping. It's had a tradition doing mapping across the nation.
Okay.
And I work for the USGS at the Minnesota Water Science Center, which is located in Mounds View, Minnesota.
Okay.
And as the Water Science Center, we focus on water issues, and we work with communities, and we work on national programs as well, looking at water use as well as water quality trends. And we have individual projects. We've just completed a study looking at White Bear Lake area. And so they're just small projects and large projects that we work on, trying to address water quality and quantity issues.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that you just finished a study on White Bear Lake water issue. And why don't you elaborate a little bit? What were you asked to study? And if you could give just a descriptive analysis of what the results of your study were up to this time.
Sure. Well, we were... this was a cooperative study working with the White Bear Lake Conservation District, as well as a variety of different state, federal, state, and local communities. And what the focus was to look at groundwater, surface water interactions in White Bear Lake. And what that was is that we were looking at water that may be coming from the ground that seeps into White Bear Lake, and then looking at water that may seep out of the lake and going into the groundwater system, and trying to quantify that, as well as get a better understanding of how those relationships between water that's entering the lake might be impacting what we're seeing as far as the lower water levels in White Bear Lake. And currently right now, the White Bear Lake's at a historic low water level. And so what we did over a year period, we collected a lot of water quality information as well as water quantity data, looked at the historic perspective to see why the water levels now are low in White Bear Lake versus in the
And I assume it's not just from the rain or lack of rain.
Well, and that was one of our findings. We looked at a historical perspective, looking at water trends from 1978 to the present. And one thing we found was that the change in the lake level could not be explained solely by changes in rainfall. We just didn't have enough of a drop in rainfall to cause the change. And so we did some work with looking at pumping rates in the area, and we found that you could explain the water level drop by some of the pumping. Now, we still need to take that further by doing an analysis using maybe some groundwater flow models and other issues to really address that issue. But we found that indirectly the precipitation couldn't explain the lake level change.
So we're going to get into the issue about what are some of the things that you want to do to continue and studying the what's going on with our lake. But I want to go a little bit further. One of the things that you indicated is that part of the problem might be that we're taking too much water out of the aquifer, which feeds White Bear Lake, and I think that's the Prairie du Chien aquifer, correct?
Yeah, it's actually the Prairie du Chien and the Jordan Sandstone. They're actually two geologic units that lie. The Prairie du Chien lies above the Jordan Sandstone, but they're hydrologically linked. In other words, water can flow pretty evenly between the two formations.
Okay.
And so that's a main aquifer. And what we found is that when we did when we looked at some of our water quality data that we collected from wells near the lake, as well as looking at the lake water, we found that there was a link between White Bear Lake and the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer. And the Prairie du Chien Jordan sits about 100 feet, 150 feet below the lake. There's glacial material, sands and clays that the glaciers brought over that sits between the bottom of the lake and the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer.
Okay.
And what we found is that we could find a link with the water chemistry that indicated that water that was leaving White Bear Lake, going down and flowing downward into the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer would then travel in the aquifer, and then the wells would pump water from that lower aquifer and bring it up, and it indicated that there was a signature that indicated that there was a mixture of the groundwater as well as surface water coming out of the lake. So we knew that there was a connection. And what we did find is that since 1980 to the present, groundwater withdrawals from that Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer have more than doubled. And so that led us to believe that this could be one of the main factors causing some of the drop in the lake level itself.
I want to get into that a little bit. So what you're really saying is that a lot of what's going on with White Bear Lake has to do with taking too much water out of the aquifer that we have. Now, when people drill a well, or when businesses or residents use water, they take water, I assume, out of the aquifer. They don't get it from the Mississippi River or from other land sources. Is that correct in this area?
Yeah. Now the issue is that when people drill wells and in different wells, you can have the wells open. In other words, they can be open to different aquifers. They could be open to the Prairie du Chien Jordan. There's some wells, particularly the residential and domestic wells. Some of them are open to glacial material, that's much higher, or shallower conditions. And then there's wells that are open to sandstone units, such as the St. Peter sandstone. And so there's different aquifers that the wells can take water from.
Okay, now Perry, we're in the land of 10,000 lakes. We're not in West Texas or in Arizona. I mean, do we really have water issues in this state? I mean, is this really a serious problem, how we take our water and use it in our community? And is this a potential problem going down the road for us if we continue what we're doing now, or expand the amount of water that we take out of the aquifer, if we don't replace it?
I think there are water quality issues across the state.
Okay.
And water quality issues.
And would you mention a couple of them with your answer?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, there's the issue in the Northeast. There's been issues in the Egan area with water levels.
And that's right in the Twin Cities.
Yes.
Egan, yeah.
Yeah, but there's also across the state now. When you look in the southwestern part of the state, there's water quantity plus water quality issues. There's a lot of groundwater that has a lot of sulfur in it, and so it makes it difficult to actually use for a drinking water source. But it's also hard for them to find good sources of water, quantity-wise, in the southwestern part of the state.
Has this always been a problem, or is this a recent problem?
It's been a problem because also some of those areas are getting larger in population centers, and also there's been more demand for water for ethanol plants and other production plants that then really kind of stress their groundwater resources.
Okay, all right.
And there's been other examples. I know the city of Hibbing in northern Minnesota had a problem with their wells going dry, or one of their wells going dry, because of mine development and dewatering associated with doing mining in northern Minnesota. And so there's spot locations that are having issues currently. And there's other places that don't have as much issues. They're more water-rich areas.
Okay, now you mentioned Egan, and that really caught my attention because Egan is right here in the heart of the Twin Cities area. And what are some of the problems that we're seeing in Egan?
Well, in Egan, I'm not a real expert on the Egan area, but I know they've had issues with water levels dropping and the groundwater levels. And so when the groundwater levels drop, then what happens is that there's less water that they can pump out of the system, obviously.
So, I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of this area, And assuming that areas like Hugo and Lionel Lakes and Centerville, which I think are under the same aquifer, right, that we are, that feeds White Bear Lake, and if they continue to grow at the projected rate that we're looking at, we're talking about adding tens of thousands of more residents into our area, that area, within the next decade and a half. So that means that if we continue to do things the way we are, taking water out of the aquifer again, that could have a more serious impact, not only on the lake level, but are you saying it could have a more serious impact on things like community development, business growth, things that would need to have a steady flow of water?
Well, it could. But, you know, there's been some projections by Met Council of, you know, issues of having water problems in the northeastern part of the metro.
Okay.
And
water problems.
Well,
in this
as far
area.
As sources, yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that makes this area, the lakes, particularly in the lakes, more sensitive in this area than other areas, is that the Prairie du Chien Jordan Aquifer is relatively shallow. In this part of the state.
Okay.
And actually, this is kind of the northern extent of that aquifer, and so it becomes fairly shallow in the northeast metro. And so then there's more of a direct connection between that aquifer and what we do to that aquifer. For instance, taking water from it and pumping from it, it'll have more of a direct connection to the lakes. And not all lakes in the northeast metro are having the water level issues such as White Bear Lake.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why is that there's other factors that affect the lake levels. For instance, if the lake has a large watershed, if you have a large watershed area, then it can probably sustain more of the changes in the with pumping. And so that it may not drop as much as some of the other lakes. For example, Bald Eagle Lake has a watershed area. When you look at the ratio of the watershed to the lake, it's about 10 to 1. In other words, the watershed's about 10 units of the lake area of White Bear Lake. If we look at Bald Eagle, if we look at White Bear Lake, it's more of like a 2 to 1 ratio.
Wow.
And so lakes like White Bear Lake will depend more on direct rainfall and groundwater inflow to keep the water levels up, whereas Bald Eagle can look at a much larger area to take water.
Now, there's a program that is, we're going to go back to some of those issues a little bit later, but I want to make sure that we discuss take a little bit of time to look at a program that we're going to be having at Century College tomorrow night. And can you explain some of the details about it? And I understand it has to deal with the water usage here in the northeast part of the metropolitan area.
Yeah, it's actually a series of 4 kind of forums that are going to be put on. It's put on by the Met Council. They're the lead agency leading the effort.
Okay, and the Met Council does what?
Well, they oversee planning, water supply planning in the 7-county metro area.
All right.
And so they're going to be involved, as well as our agency, the US GS. And the first one of these forums is tomorrow night. And what it is it's a and the purpose of this forum is to educate people, to give them information about what's going on, and it gives them an opportunity to address some questions that they may have too on the situation. And the first forum is tomorrow night is going to focus on groundwater. It's going to be basically an introduction to groundwater, because you know the concept of groundwater it may be hard for people to understand because groundwater is basically water that sits in the rocks and the formation, sits in the pore spaces or the holes that are in rocks that sits well deep in the ground. So people don't see it often. And so what we're going to have is a forum that the first forum is going to describe that. There's going to be 4 presentations given. One kind of introduction to groundwater. The second one's going to be talking about groundwater in the state. Where do we have for resources? And then the Met Council is going to talk briefly about the metro area. What are the water issues in the metro area? And then I will give a presentation specifically on the Northeast Metro and what are some of the issues.
And that'll be tomorrow night, or is that the whole list of the
That's tomorrow night.
Okay.
And as far those are part of the presentations, we're also going to have breakout work groups where where we'll have displays that'll talk about different things about groundwater and specifically lake water balance also. And so we'll have equipment demonstrations so people can see what tools we use to understand groundwater. We can look at there will be some groundwater flow models, little models to kind of give people a better understanding of what, when we talk about groundwater, what we're looking at.
It seems to me that this type of a program is extremely valuable, because what it does is it educates people on all of the dynamics that have to deal with how the groundwater issue relates to the lake level issue, and it just isn't a series of let's just pump more water into the lake. It has to deal, there are a lot of different dynamics that take place that affect the lake and affect our water usage.
Oh, exactly. And I think we're hoping this first one then helps people along the way as we go to the other forum workshops. And what we're planning on for the second workshop would be looking at some of the proposed solutions, possible solutions to lower lake levels, specifically for White Bear Lake, but also there's other lakes that are having water level problems. And so that would be the second forum, which the dates haven't been set totally for the other forums, but probably sometime in May we're looking. And then there would also be a forum on water conservation and looking at some of the newer practices as far as conserving water. And then there would also be, towards the end of this year, there'll be probably a forum on some of the feasibility aspects of looking at the feasibilities of possible solutions for some of the water level issues. I mean, how much is it going to cost to put in various things? What's going to be, and what are actually going to be the water, what kind of water supply can we get from various options? I mean, and so that'll steer towards, you know, looking at what are going to be the best solutions we can apply to solving some of the low lake level issues.
Now, I want to get into that a little bit further in depth, because I know one of the things that that we're looking at is we need to really understand all the dynamics that are going on before we can come up with a series of solutions that are actually going to work. And some of that needs a little bit more study.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that there are some plans that have been put forth to the legislature to do just that. And could you explain a little bit about the role of the USGS, US Geological Survey, and some of the further study and analysis that you think might need to be done to help us corral potential solutions to the lake level issue? And what are you looking at for funding, and how are things going in that area?
Yeah, there's currently 2 bills that are going through the House and 2 bills going through the Senate to look at funding. And the USGS is working directly with the Met Council on one of the bills to look at doing some more studies on lakes across the Northeast Metro, getting a better understanding of what's going on with those lakes. In particular, trying to find out what are the common things that are causing some of the lakes to have lower water levels. And we want to expand that work, but also included in that work would be trying to figure out how much water do we think is leaving White Bear Lake and going down into that Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer. We did the water quality tests that showed us that there is a connection. We've got some ballpark estimates, but we'd like to get a better handle of what's going on with White Bear Lake, so that then when we come up with the solutions and propose solutions, we have a better feel for how much we can expect as far as the water volume that we'll need to keep the water levels to some appropriate level. And then we also are looking at working with Met Council and using a groundwater flow model to come up with possible better optimization for pumping in the area. So maybe that would reduce the impacts of pumping on the lake levels themselves. And so we're looking for funding through these bills to do those efforts. And another combined effort would be looking at solutions, doing the feasibility studies for solutions to the White Bear Lake issue.
Wonderful.
Water levels. And that effort is being led by Met Council, and they'll be looking at that and trying, if the funding comes available, we'd be working in those efforts.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you giving us this detail, and I just want everybody to remember that tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m., Century College, this very valuable program will be taking place, and want people to understand that they should go and attend that to learn more about the dynamics between White Bear Lake and how the aquifers affect our lake level and development around our community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to mention that they'll be advertising for the other 3 forums that we talked about. And so just because you don't attend the first one doesn't mean you can't show up for any other.
But we want everybody to attend the first one.
So, yeah, of course.
So, okay, so
Sure.
that's 6:30 tomorrow night at Century College. Thank you very much,
Great.
Perry.
Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been watching Your Business Matters. For more information on this program or the White Bear Area Chamber, visit www.whitebearchamber.com or call 651-429-8593.